Mrityorma amrutam gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om. May the Divine lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. Om. Peace, peace, peace.
You are the sun, you are the sky, you are the earth. People call you by many names. You are all in all, O Supreme. Tu hi Surya, tu hi Chandra, tu hi Surya, tu hi Chandra, tu hi Pavana, tu hi Agana, tu hi Apa, tu Akasha, tu hi Dharani, Ajaha Mana, tu hi Surya, tu hi Chandra, tu hi Pavana, tu hi Agana, tu hi Apa, tu Akasha, tu hi Dharani, Ajaha Mana, tu hi Surya, tu hi Chandra, Bhava Rudra Ugra Sarva Pashu Pati Sama Samana Ishana Bhima Sakala Terehi Ashta Nama, tu hi Surya, tu hi Chandra, Bhava Rudra Ugra Sarva Pashu Pati Samasa Mana Ishana Bhima Surya tu he Chandra tu.
I'm reading from the book Religion in Practice. This is by Swami Vidyanathananda. The chapter is Goal of Life. The ideal, the end of life, is the unitive knowledge of Godhead. This must never be forgotten. The modern man, in the name of practicality, often regards a man with the spiritual ideal as a queer creature, a dreamer. Suppose you see a man walking with a heavy burden on his shoulders. You ask him, "What is this burden you are carrying?" He answers, "I don't know." "Where are you going?" "I don't know." If these were the answers you were to receive from such a person, what would you think of him? Would you really consider him as a practical man? Yet, such is the irony of this age that he who tries to find an answer to such questions is considered a dreamer. True, it is that everyone tries to form some ideal, some end he may try to achieve. But until a man learns the spiritual ideal, he cannot find the exact purpose of his life and living. And in the words of the Gita, his will wanders in all directions after innumerable aims. We must understand the spiritual ideal. Then our will, in the words of the Gita, must be directed singly towards one ideal. No compromise can be made with this ideal. Only then it is possible to develop that concentration of the will which leads a man to absorption in God. Contemplative life, absorption in God, is a stage in our development. To achieve that, we must be active. Work is a means, not an end. To quote the words of the Gita, which teaches absorption in God, nobody can become perfect by merely ceasing to act. A man who renounces certain physical actions but still lets his mind dwell on the objects of his sensual desire is deceiving himself. He can only be called a hypocrite. The truly admirable man controls his senses by the power of his will. All his actions are disinterested. All are directed along the path to union with Brahman. The world is imprisoned in its own activity, except when actions are performed as worship of God. Therefore, you must perform every action sacramentally and be free from all attachment to results. What is the secret of worshipping God through actions? Try to understand that behind our surface life and our outward consciousness, there is the deeper life, the inner consciousness which is identical with God. The appearance of a world cannot exist without some ground as support. That ground is Brahman, God, reality. Learn therefore to see God within yourself and in the universe. Then act with your senses and let your work be the worship of God. To quote the words of the Gita again, if a man sees Brahman in every action, he will find Brahman. Here is reading.
Now a short period of meditation. Good morning, friends. Today is a special Sunday. We have a guest speaker. I would like now to invite Swami Vidyanathananda Maharaj, more affectionately known as Mohan Maharaj, to come and please take the chair. Let him take the chair and then I will introduce him. He's so well known, there's nothing much to introduce about him. He is a great scientist and a great mathematician, known all over the world, and very awarded, recognized, and everybody knows him in the field of mathematics. And in monastic life too, he's very viveka and vairagya, as we say, dispassionate in life, doesn't have any other, nothing. So special monastic quality he has about total renunciation. His love is Sri Ramakrishna and mathematics. Both he loves very dearly. He had been such a great mathematician. As you know, he had the degrees from India in a very reputed institution, and also from the US, from UCB. He did PhD. And he was in Belur and TIFR, one of the very renowned institute of India, in Tata Institute of Fundamental Research in Mumbai. They requested Belur to depute him to TIFR as a professor of mathematics there. So he's that much. They're asking a monk to come and teach the mathematics. So is his knowledge about mathematics. If we say only he has great knowledge of mathematics, it will be not fully his introduction. He has similar great knowledge of scriptures, of Vedanta, of Buddhism. He is such an erudite, very learned, really, really learned person, Vidwan as you call. He's full of Vidya. So it befits him his monastic name, Vidyanathananda. So not taking much time, I request Swami Vidyanathananda Maharaj, our dear Mohan Maharaj, to give his talk today, very aptly chosen and very interesting subject, Enquiry in Vedanta. Swami Vidyanathananda Maharaj.
Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Revered Swami Kripamayanji, my friends and my brother monks here, monks and nuns here. So firstly, it's very gracious introduction by Kripamayanji, as usual. So grace is Kripa, so well, gracious. Right, so we will talk about an inquiry into in Vedanta, existing in Vedanta. And we'll start with the first sutra of the Brahma Sutras, which marks out what this is about. So the first sutra of the Brahma Sutras, 555 of them, first one says, Atha Ato Brahma Jigyasa. So what is, so firstly, we just heard Avijit read out from this book by Prabhuvanji, and we keep using this word Brahman, etc., etc. And I think part of this is to know what exactly we mean by it, and trying to find out what it means, and more importantly, not as an abstract inquiry, but what it has to do with our lives here and now. Yeah? If it is not real in that sense, if it is not relevant in that sense, then we'll become like that person who was cited in that story of carrying a bunch of things on one's head, not knowing what is contained there and where we are headed. Yeah. So it means that this enquiry is supposed to be something that is very relevant to us, very real to us. So what is jigyasa? Yeah. Athato Brahma jigyasa. So the thing is, Sanskrit is a pretty precise language, and so if you look at this word jigyasa, and it comes from this dhatu, which is the root verb, the root of verbs, which is gya. Yeah, so that's the word from which jnana, knowledge, etc. comes. And when you have this kind of repetition, ja and gya is actually a repetition. So it's jigyasa, gya plus something. It basically means that a desire to know. So for example, pipasa is thirst, so it's a desire to drink, yeah, etc., etc. So here it's jigyasa means desire to know. Desire to know what? Yeah? So here it is supposed to be Brahman, and the rest of the talk is really supposed to be about how we execute this enquiry. Yeah? It's really trying to find out what exactly this word Brahman means. And the instrument or the method of this, the desire to know truth or Brahman is supposed to be fulfilled by this process which is called enquiry. Enquiry really means asking questions, but here it's asking questions fueled by this desire for truth. Yeah? All right, and there are these two words before it, atha, ataha, athato brahma jigyasa. So atha means now, atha, after, atha means after, and then brahma jigyasa, after what? And Shankara basically says, after acquiring certain qualifications. Yeah? So essentially, the point being that, look, we can go on trying to understand why there are 52 cards in a deck. Yeah? And that's going to be some kind of an enquiry also. But is this that kind of an enquiry? This is not the point here. So unless that enquiry is driven by something, some really felt dissatisfaction, there is something that we want to know which we don't. Yeah? Unless it is backed by some kind of a dissatisfaction of that sort, this desire to know will not be fueled by something. So on the negative side, there is this certain dissatisfaction, and coupled with that, there is this positive desire to know the truth. So what exactly? So this is what one means when one says there is a acquisition of a qualification. Acquisition of a qualification means that there are certain avenues of enquiry that we already have in our common sense empirical life, which we have exercised to the best of our capacity and found something lacking. Yeah? And therefore, a seeking of something more has come about. This is a feeling. This is not some intellectual cogitation. Yeah? So something has come up in our felt life where there is a perceived dissatisfaction with certain things and a perceived aspiration for certain other things. And the clearer this is, the better will be our process of enquiry. So again, what exactly does this preceding condition mean? And again, from another Upanishad, we have said enquiry in Vedanta, right? So Vedanta literally means essentially the essence of what we call the Vedas, where Vedas are not defined as some 4 books, but Vivekananda talks about it as the essence of all knowledge of all mankind, not particularly confined to any book. Therefore, there is a certain situation, certain human situation, which is universal, and that universal human situation, not restricted to any particular creed, sect, religion, etc., is being addressed. So it's a kind of a human condition that is being addressed, a certain aspiration for something higher, which is there in all human beings, is being addressed. How does one define it? And in the Mundaka Upanishad says, Parikshya lokan karmachitan brahmana nirvedam ayat na asti akrita kritena. So what does it mean? This pariksha, that means having looked at carefully, having analyzed carefully, lokan. Lokan means all our empirical life. Karmachitan, that means all that empirical life and the rewards and benefits and not so pleasant things that come our way, having examined that fairly carefully, karmachitan, born out of various things that we do, yeah, as fruits of our labor or fruits of somebody else's labor. Having done that, one comes to this understanding that none of this is abiding. Yeah? So one exercises, puts in some amount of labor for some particular kind of work. The work brings its benefits, they go away. Yeah? Sometimes it brings pleasant fruit, sometimes it brings unpleasant stuff, but that passes. The pleasant passes, the unpleasant passes. So having seen that there is nothing abiding in this things that are won out of work, nasti akrita kritena. This is the expression of dissatisfaction that is there, that which is abiding, that which is permanent, cannot be achieved through any kind of particular action. This understanding, in some form or the other, has come. This is the real qualification that is being talked about. Because if one is coming to this, and therefore I think all of us are eligible on that count, because otherwise we wouldn't be here, we wouldn't be trying to understand this. So there is nothing abiding that we get out of our work in the world, and coupled with that, the positive desire, but I want something permanent, something abiding, something that I can, something that holds me together. This aspiration has come about. Tad vijnanartham gurumeva abhigachet samitpani shrotriyam brahmanishtam. So basically one goes to, as with any other disciplines, one tries to seek out a source of that knowledge. And look, this is my problem. My problem is that I have examined the various things that I do, and I found that I do not get something abiding out of that. Where can I get this? Something that abides, something that is permanent. This is the question that comes. And then the answer is sought to this particular existential question. Yeah? So it is an existential question in the here and now, because this desire for something permanent, something abiding, is in the here and now. It's not something that is abstract. So the more concrete this aspiration is, the more fruitful will our inquiry be. And this is the kind of question, if you look at various Upanishads, implicitly or explicitly, what they are doing is they are picking up some central question that is being formulated differently across different books, and then the rest of the book, rest of these verses in a particular Upanishad are aimed at answering this particular question more or less comprehensively. So let's start with, so what we'll be doing for the rest of this talk today is picking up 3 of these questions which emphasize 3 of our fundamental aspirations, which at the end we will conclude that these 3 aspirations are not really different from each other, but they really converge to the one central aspiration, which we don't really have a word for. So one, which we've already talked about, is something permanent, something abiding. So an inquiry into something that is permanent, something that is abiding, is what in Vedanta is often referred to as Sat Atmak Vivek. Sat is that which is. Yeah, it comes from this again, from this verb as, which means is, yeah, to be, the verb to be, is. So what is? What is? And the implication being what is permanent, what is, and it is not conflated with or is not contradicted by an is not. Yeah? So that's the first kind of thing, and then we'll go to other aspects of this. So let's first try to address how in the Upanishads this Satatmak Vivek is done, and where this Satatmak Vivek comes up in fairly explicit terms. So in the Kathopanishad, yeah, so it starts with this story of Nachiketa asking Yama, supposed to be the god of death. Yeah? Yeyam, and this is the question, it's a very poetic question. Yeyam prete vichikitsa manushe asti iti eke na asti iti chaike. So when somebody dies, again, see how relevant that question is. I mean, it's a part and parcel of our existence that human life, as we know it in our common sense, empirical sense, culminates in death. Yeah? And then there are various stories that are manufactured around it according to different belief systems. Yeah? Somebody says that there's going to be a day of reckoning, so one is going to be buried, and there's going to be a day of reckoning when one will have to face God. In another belief system, there is that one has to go through metempsychosis, basically birth and rebirth. So it's essentially there are Semitic religions and there are the Oriental religions, and they have these various ways and narratives to address this, essentially trying to suggest that no, there is something that is beyond death. Yeah? And then there are the other end, even in India, there were the Charvakas who said, no, that's it. You die, you're burnt, end of story. Yeah? Bhasmi bhutasya dehasya punaragamanam kuta. So once the body has been burnt and finished, where is this coming back from? Yeah? So there are opinions on both sides. And Nachiketa basically is asking questions of death itself. So here death is somehow imagined as something outside, but really it is one's own death that is being addressed. And in the penetrating nature of this young boy's mind is to be admired, because somehow or the other he recognizes in himself the fact that this that one is calling oneself in this conflated sense is going to die, nothing that is going to change about that particular fact. And there are answers that are given also from a very secular point of view. So there is a Charlie Chaplin movie. I've forgotten the name. It was one of his final movies, and he's trying to help a ballerina who has some kind of a problem with dancing and saying she can't dance anymore. And he tells her that one thing is as sure as death, and that is life. Yeah? So there are answers that are given in all ways. Yeah? So there are all very positive things, but the fact of the matter is that one dies. Yeah? And here the question is, basically Nachiketa is not satisfied by these answers which are given in terms of narratives and feel-good stories. Yeah? And therefore what he is saying is, asti iti eke, somebody says that person is, na asti iti cha eke, some other said person is not. Implicit question therefore is, what is the truth about this? And the only thing that one can answer really is death itself, which means an examination of what we really mean by death has to be done. Yeah? That's where the answer has to come from. Fine. So the question is formulated. Why? Because basically what one is asking, what Nachiketa is asking here is there an existence which transcends death? This is the question that is being asked. Or is it that it is the culmination and there is nothing beyond? This basic question is being asked. Now, the answer comes in the, so first, of course, Yama basically tries to dissuade. Again, these are stories, but essentially it's again something about how our mind functions. Oh, this is a very difficult question. I don't have an answer. Let me go back and do my own business. Yeah? So essentially, okay, fine. Let's try to seek joy in this world. Yeah? Part of it is that Charlie Chaplin's answer. Yeah? Life is as sure as death. Fine, so let's get back to it. Yeah? But the thing is, if one is really interested in getting to the bottom of this question, then this answer is not satisfactory. And in fact, so we'll come to the answer to this question in a while, but I'll try to mention here that it is not just in various traditional Indian books that this question has been formulated with such clarity. There is a poem, longish poem, it's in the form of a drama, by this great poet T.S. Eliot. It's called Murder in the Cathedral. Yeah, so it refers to one Thomas Becket, who was the Archbishop of Canterbury, who was supposed to be a friend, a very close friend of the king's, and the king had actually planted him as an Archbishop of Canterbury. This was a time where there was a huge conflict, early, maybe 1100, somewhere there, somewhere around that time. There was a huge conflict between the Crown of England and the Church of England, and essentially the king wanted to put his own man as the Archbishop, and then that would basically resolve the problem. And what the story goes is that once he becomes this Archbishop, he takes up his new responsibility in all seriousness and becomes an extreme, the conflict then takes a much more extreme form. So the political aim of the king is defeated, and here is this Archbishop who is countering the king by taking up his responsibility as the Archbishop very seriously. And this poem by Eliot, it's really Eliot's thoughts. Eliot is supposed to have read many of these Upanishads, so it's possible, very possible, that he was influenced. So in fact, there's another poem of his called What the Thunder Said. It's basically it's this Brihadaranyaka 5th chapter. So that's what comes in. In this particular poem, while there is no explicit reference, but the thought process seems something very similar, and he puts it in this very perceptive, poetic language. Your thoughts have more power than kings to compel you. You have also thought sometimes at your prayers, sometimes hesitating at the angles of stairs, and between sleep and waking, early in the morning, when the bird cries, have thought of further scorning. And this is the next line is a crucial line. That nothing lasts, but the wheel turns, the nest is rifled and the bird mourns, that the shrine shall be pillaged and the gold spent, the jewels gone for light ladies' ornament, when miracles cease and the faithful desert you, and men shall only do their best to forget you. And later is worse, when men will not hate you enough to defame or to execrate you, but pondering the qualities that you lacked, will only try to find the historical fact, when men shall declare that there was no mystery about this man who played a certain part in history. So this impermanence, this notion of impermanence, has come to the heart of this. I won't say further about this particular thing, but essentially it's his own thoughts coming up that nothing lasts but the wheel turns. The wheel of the world goes on, and there is no permanence here. And then he asks this question, is there something permanent in all this? Yeah? It's basically the same motivation that led Nachiketa to ask this question, and then somehow in this 20th century poet, we find essentially the same reformulation. The point of saying this is essentially that this is an essential existential question, and it's not something that we can really avoid. Yeah? That's nothing that any of us can really avoid. Now, what is the answer that is given in the Kathopanishad? The answer that is given is not in terms of a comfortable story, not in terms of this, what is going to happen after death, not some narrative, not some story. What is the first thing that Yama says? He says, the first answer that is given is Shreyascha Preyascha Manushyameta Tau Abhidhyayan Vivinakti Dhiraha. So that means this does not seem to answer the question at all. That means the pleasant and the preferable. Shreya is that which is preferable, Preya is that which is pleasant. Shreyascha Preyascha Manushyameta. They come to a person as choices to be made. Tau Abhidhyayan, having examined that, Vivinakti separates these out very clearly. Dhiraha. Dhiraha means somebody equipped with a steady intellect. Dhiraha. So dhi means basically it's this capacity of, it's essentially the steady intellect which is referred to as dhi. It's also the origin of the word buddhi in Vedanta. So one with a steady intellect separates out these two, the preferable and the permanent. Now, why is this answer given? He asked, Nachiketa asked, is there life? He did not, I should point out, he did not ask whether there is life after death. He's basically asking, some people say one continues to exist, and somebody says that no, does not, ceases to exist. What is the truth? And the answer is given that, well, person comes, if the pleasant and the preferable come along, and the person discriminates, analyzes, and separates out the two. Why is this answer given? It's a build-up. Yeah? It's basically saying that when these two things, when this question that Nachiketa is asking, implicit in that, is a deep and fundamental question, and a superficial narrative answer is not going to satisfy such an inquirer. And therefore, the mind needs to be capable of trying to understand the real significance of that question that Nachiketa asked, because that question, that answer is going to be something that is satisfactory to all people, yeah? To any other person who comes up with that question and is not satisfied by a pleasant narrative. Yeah? So then this builds up and essentially says, look, in your own existence, ask yourself what really is permanent and what really is not. In other words, what do you really mean by that question? And if this process of inquiry becomes an introspective method of analysis, then this process that probes into the subject, that asks this question, then the answer is going to come from within. It's not going to come from without. Because this is a deep question, a formulated answer or a formulaic answer in terms of a story, in terms of somebody else telling you something, it is said in the scriptures such and such, not going to be a satisfactory answer till one finds that answer for oneself, which means that this process of inquiry has to be directed within oneself and basically asking, where exactly is this question coming from and what do I have to do about it? In other words, in one's own existence, What do I mean by part of that aspect of my existence which is permanent, and that part of my existence which is impermanent? This analysis, or viveka, has to be done. Yeah? This is called discrimination or viveka, but it's analysis, analytical thinking with a driven by this will. So in fact, actually, Vivekananda in one of his lectures talks about the analytical will of the philosopher. It's not a cogitative will by which we just write philosophical papers, and now you have all these postmodern papers which are one in every maybe 5 words is comprehensible. Anyway, so that's not the aim here. Yeah, here it's basically this analytical will, which means it's something that is going to guide our lives. Yeah? So which means in a deeper sense than something that we are accustomed to. And for that, we need to be able to analyze at every stage, if one is taking a step in one's life, is this preferable, or is this something that I would prefer to do? I mean, in the long run, or is it only something pleasant and that I am doing something on the short-term scale? This is the discrimination, this analysis, that we are creatures bound by this thing called time, which is what basically gives rise to this notion of impermanence. What is it in us that supersedes this domination of time? Is there some aspect of ourselves which supersedes time? That is the deeper question towards which the mind is being led. Yeah? And therefore, it starts from a stage where we can understand in terms of our empirical life. Being what? At every stage, or often in our life, we have a choice to be made, and that choice is either for something that is a short-term gain or something that is beneficial in a long-term sense. The cultivation of this analytical capacity is going to lead us to a position where we can answer that question of Nachiketa satisfactorily for ourselves. So what is being given as an answer is not a dogma, not a doctrine, but really a method by which one can actually find that answer for oneself. That's why the first answer is really teaching a method by which Nachiketa himself will be able to find a satisfactory answer to his own question. And like any other deep question, which has to do with one's own subjective existence, a story or a narration by other people does not affect. Yeah? So we have all these truths been floating around for thousands of years. How much does it really affect us today? How much does it affect the person on the street today? Not much. If it was really so effective, then everybody would have gone this way. Yeah? So that's not it. It's really when we train our minds this way that satisfactory answers can be obtained. Okay. So this is as far as the Sat Atmak Vivek that we were talking about, which means a seeking of something abiding. That is one of the ways the Upanishads formulates this question and proceeds to give really more of a methodology rather than an answer. Yeah? A methodology through which one can find the answer for oneself. And it is really for those who experiment with it, yeah, who are going to do something about it, that it is given, that this answer is given. If it is just something to be played around with and as some third-person activity, which does not really affect one's own life at every stage, then that answer would not be particularly satisfactory, and this paragraph, this kind of answer is not really meant for such a person. So it's really for somebody to whom that question makes sense. It is something that existentially bothers one. Okay, so basically this is something that is abiding, the Sat Atmak Vivek. So now we come to what is in Vedanta is referred to as Chit Atmak, so which basically something that has to do with knowledge. And this word sat, that which is very closely related to the Sanskrit word for that, which is satya, Sanskrit word which is related to that, which is satya. Satya, we usually translate as truth. Yeah? But the connotation meaning is that which is. And that which is truth. At that level, these two fundamental aspects of philosophy, ontological, about being, that which is, and epistemological, that which is true, they are really coinciding. So what Vedanta is really doing is saying, I mean, this Chitatmak Vivek, it's basically for minds which are oriented towards seeking that which is abiding, is the first thing that we discussed. Now we come to minds which are oriented towards truth, empirically. In their day-to-day life, this is, I would like to know the truth about this. This is for such minds, this Chitatmak Vivek is advocated. And a question is formulated in a different Upanishad, called the Mundaka Upanishad, where basically it says, Saunako Havai Maha, it always starts with a kind of a story. Saunako Havai Mahasalo, Angirasam Vidhivat Upasannam Pracha. Some person who had a lot of wealth, etc., approaches a rishi called Angiras. And the question he asks is, Kasminnu Bhagavo Vignate Sarvam Idam Vignatam Bhavati iti. Knowing what? See, one is knowing all these pieces of knowledge. And then when one starts off, it says, okay, look, here I would like to know something that is fundamentally true about all this. For such a mind, okay, one finds, and it's a struggle, and then something comes up, and then one realizes that one has only made what we in mathematics call epsilon progress, just a little bit of progress. And that is the fate of our human knowledge. And then at some point of time, am I going to keep spending my whole life making these little progresses? Or is there something more fundamental? Is there something by knowing which all of this is known? Yeah. And that's a question that is proposed. And the answer that is first given is that there are two kinds of knowledge. And the first thing, the answer given by Angiras is, there are two kinds of knowledge, Dve Vidya Veditavya. And then first thing that he starts dismissing is all the Vedas. Yeah. So he basically says there are these two things. One, that is the apara, then there is the para. And that which is apara means that which is basically not going to be a real answer to your question. What does that include? He starts with Rig Veda, Sama Veda, Yajur Veda, all the Vedas knocked off. Yeah. So which means all this sacred knowledge that we have, Purana, Itihasa, all of that. Yeah. All of that, and Jyotish, yeah, so yeah, closest representative of mathematics in those times. All of that dismissed. And then the answer to what is really going to satisfy this particular inquirer, basically the person has actually looked into seen where exactly this question comes from. Knowing what, do we know everything? The answer is, Yaya tat aksharam adhigamyate. It does not give any reference to any book. That process of inquiry through which that which does not change, akshara. Akshara is that which changes. That process of inquiry through which that unchanging is known. See how this inquiry into truth has now become exactly the same as that which is abiding. A somewhat different answer is given in this little Upanishad called the Mandukya. It's got just 12 verses. And basically, the inquiry in all these Upanishads is essentially into the subject that inquires. Yeah? The person, it's supposed to be relevant to the person performing the inquiry. Yeah? So who is the person that is performing this inquiry? And then take that person in its more or less general form and start looking at it in some aspects. So you say, okay, fine, you acquire knowledge, correct? But do you acquire knowledge only when you're awake? Or, I mean, what are the different ways that which you feel that you do acquire knowledge? He says, Kasminnu bhagavat vignate sarvam idam vignate. So what is this sarvam idam that you're talking about? So sarvam idam, all this. So what exactly is all this that you really mean? So one tries to break it up. It's okay, fine. So one acquires knowledge in broadly 3 conditions of our being. That's the way the answer in Mandukya is formulated. So when this is in our usual waking state, we acquire knowledge. There's this room, there's this chair, etc., etc. Then when we are dreaming, we again have some imagination that comes up, even while sitting down, and particularly for the faculty of imagination is a very important faculty for all of us. So when we are really sitting down quietly and trying to imagine out something, that's also some kind of a dream that is affecting us here. So that's also a way of acquiring knowledge. And then when one is tired and one is one is sleeping, one is acquiring nothing, no knowledge. There is no object of knowledge. So basically, what this answer does from this Mandukya is basically says that, look, every day you acquire knowledge in these 3 states. Either you're awake, acquiring the knowledge of the, so it's basically, therefore, the waking state is a state in which you acquire knowledge. The dream state is something where you acquire some knowledge, some imagination. And finally, you acquire knowledge of nothing when you're sleeping. So which means that the first 2 is an acquisition of knowledge of something as opposed to the acquisition of knowledge of nothing in deep sleep. Why do you say you're acquiring knowledge of nothing? Because when you wake up, you say, oh, I knew nothing. So nothing is a kind of a paradoxical thing. No thing is almost labeled as something which is nothing. It's a paradoxical thing, but that's because of a problem with our logic, problem with our words. And therefore, if you really want a serious answer to this question, one has to ask, is this acquisition of knowledge, the principle of knowledge, which is functioning in these 3 situations, is that the same thing? Is that principle of knowledge the same? Or is it inevitably conditioned by one of these 3 states through which we are acquiring knowledge? But the point is that we say, yes, I was dreaming, I acquired such a piece of knowledge. I am awake now, I am acquiring such another piece of knowledge. I was in deep sleep, I acquired no piece of knowledge. So that means that this principle of knowledge functioning through me is not something that is limited to either of these 3 states. So this is called this avasthatraya viveka, again analysis. So can one separate out these 3 states and understand this principle of generalized knowledge which functions through me in all these 3 states? That is so can one, it's not removing these 3. That's the usually connotation of neti is not this, which means somehow or the other you remove the sleeping state and put it in some other docket. That's not what it is meant. It's basically saying, okay, there is this condition through which I acquire knowledge. There is this other condition through which I acquire knowledge. What is the common generalization of these 2? And that common generalization of these 2, and then also, and that's basically going to give me a common generalization of this principle of knowledge, which says that something is. That something could be in the dream state, something could be in a waking state. But then if you really want a unification, you will also have to find a unification of something is and nothing is. Once one gets there, then one has this. Basically, it's trying to probe through all these 3 states, which we feel are inevitable as conditions of knowing. And we are basically challenging this assumption that it is inevitable, that we have to acquire knowledge through this, or this, or this. And it cannot be separated out. The answer is basically there has to be a separation, because you don't say that I in the waking state is a different person, I in the dream is a different person, etc., etc. So it is all tied together. So this principle of knowledge does exist as something that unifies all this. Can one probe through there? That's the answer given in the Mandukya. Finally, the other aspiration, so we've talked about aspiration for something that is abiding. Second, the aspiration for knowledge or truth. Finally, and this is probably something that most of us instinctively react to as something that's very natural, the seeking of joy or satisfaction. Yeah? So this is what's called the Ananda-atmak Vivek. Yeah? So in another Upanishad, the Taittiriya Upanishad, one of the chapters, the second chapter, it's called Brahmananda Valli. Yeah? And it starts off with Saesha, one of the place where this analysis starts, Saesha Anandasya Mimamsa Bhavati. Mimagamsa Bhavati. So basically, what exactly is this joy, satisfaction? That's what is being inquired into there. It's a slightly different way of inquiry. Basically, it says, okay, fine, take some youthful person to whom, who is capable, strong, and to whom this world full of wealth has presented itself. That is one unit of human joy. And then it goes on increasing by 100, by 100, by 100, etc., etc. Finally, it comes to Saesha. In the middle, Indra is taken and dismissed. Yeah, basically, actually, in one of Vivekananda's things, he says, what do these gods do? They drink nectar and get rheumatism. Now, not a particularly satisfactory kind of joy to aspire for. Yeah. And in fact, it's supposed to be, the fellow is supposed to suffer extremely from jealousy. Anybody who wants to go through that, he says, okay, I haven't been able to get over this fascination for all these little things. Yeah, going back to Nachiketa's answer, it says to Yama, when Yama offers him all these enjoyments, basically all these enjoyments that the mythological gods or Indra is supposed to have, he says, Shobhava martyasya yadanta kaitat sarvendriyanam jarayanti teja. Yeah? That means shwa. Shwa means there tomorrow. Yeah? It's not swa. It's the second SH, the SH sound. Shwa is tomorrow, from which we have this word parashwa, parso. Yeah? Day after tomorrow. Yeah? So shwa is tomorrow. Shwa bhava. Yeah? So that which has the nature of tomorrow. Yeah? Which means that which is there today and gone tomorrow. Shobhava martyasya yad antakaitat, that which has an end. Yeah? Sarvendriyanam, that it exhausts us. And then at the end of this, Yama, you keep your song and dance. Yeah? Tava iva baha, tava nrityagita. This song and dance is not something that I'm particularly fascinated about. So basically, he's dismissing Indra. No wonder Indra gets jealous. Yeah? Okay, so it goes on, and finally, it comes to sa eka brahmana anandaha shrotriyasya cha kamahatasya. So basically, this knowledge of Brahman is supposed to be the culmination. Brahman is actually a placeholder for that which is abiding, that which is true, that which is permanently joyful. Yeah? So the inquiry into joy too culminates in the same inquiry as what it is giving. And after having said that this is the joy, this is the permanent abiding joy that you are seeking, concludes with sa yaschayam purushe yascha asau aditya sya ekaha. That which is there in this individual, that which is there in the sun, is one. Saya evam vita. Whoever knows this, that means basically that reality that through which all this nature in its all joyful forms, things which give us joy, is coming up and going away. That is the essence of joy in oneself, in particular in me. One who knows this, what happens? Asmat lokat pretya. That means having given up this world. It's phrased in a way which can be actually misinterpreted as going away from this world, going somewhere. But the rest of the thing makes it clear. What does such a person do? Basically says, Etam annamayam atmanam upasankramati, etam pranamayam atmanam upasankramati, etam manomayam atmanam upasankramati, etam vijnanamayam atmanam upasankramati, etam anandamayam atmanam upasankramati. So basically, these various conditions of our being, we think of ourselves as a physical being, we think of ourselves as a mental being. We think of ourselves as somebody who's vitally active, or somebody who is capable of thinking, analyzing, intellect, power for intellect. And finally, one who has the capacity to have joy. What does it say? Upasankramati, transcends. Does not go somewhere, transcends, which means the identity, the locus of one's being is identified as something that is beyond all of this. Yeah? It's a seeking of the transcendent in the here and now. That's the paradox of it. It's not going somewhere. And where does one, I mean, what is a positive way of this talking about this transcendence? Well, how does one talk about this transcendence? It says, yato vacho, where does one go? Yeah, that's if one thinks of it as going, where does one go? Yato vacho nivartante aprapya manasasaha anandam brahmano vidvan na biveti kutascha neti. So from where speech returns along with the mind. That means a path is pointed out, but what we think of as our conceptual frameworks, our capacity for intellect asking and answering questions, that returns from that locus of permanent joy. Anandam Brahmano, knowing that essence of joy as all-pervasive, as unconditioned, what happens? Na bibheti kutascha neti. There is no trace of any fear left. Why? Because there is no second to be afraid of. What becomes the behavior of such a person? Etagam havavana tapati kimaham sadhuna karavam kimaham papama karavam iti. Such a person does not lament, oh, why did I do all these wrongs? Why did I not do all these rights? Yeah? That means basically all this business that started off with that question, which is in a different Upanishad, that all right, all this stuff that can be achieved by work is impermanent. That question is also answered by the inquiry into this essence of joy. So basically, I think this particular thing, in fact, in some place in Vivekananda talks about this particular statement that the Upanishads talk about one thing above everything else, which is this absence of fear, fearlessness, abhi. Abhayam vai janako prapnoti. Here it says, na bibheti kutascha neti. This comes back again and again. It's essentially this one root that, what exactly, I mean, if we try to analyze it in terms of, say, modern scientific parlance, fear at the root is fear of losing something. Losing satisfaction, losing existence. Fear of death is basically if somebody comes along and chops off my head, I think that I am gone. So my existence is gone. Some fellow steals something which could be an intellectual piece of knowledge and tries to pass it off as his or her own. Yeah. We are afraid because that's basically we have an ownership of that. We feel that we have an ownership of this knowledge. Or I am feeling satisfied. This fellow comes and generally behaves nastily. I was sitting in one's room feeling very happy and satisfied. Somebody has come and taken that joy away. So essentially, once one has gotten to that, all these frameworks of mind through which one gains truth or this knowledge of existence or joy is not something that can possibly be taken away by anything outside. No framework of one's mind can possibly affect it. This clarity of understanding now has become so permanent in such a person who basically has transcended. That's why this Annamayam Atmanam Upasankramati, basically saying that, look, this is not what I am. This is not just what I am. I am not just this body. I am not just this vital force. I am not just this mind. I am not just this capacity for acquiring these fragmented truths. I am not just this capacity for joy. So this is Anandamayam Atmanam. What happens? One gets to a stage where one finds this unconditioned existence, knowledge, bliss. Yeah? So this is how Satchitananda has been translated, and there are these different passages in the Upanishads which take up one or the other depending on individual's mental orientation, yeah? And then proceeds through this enquiry. I'll finally end by saying that, look, this is not this framework of what we call Sat Chitananda or existence, knowledge, bliss in the Indian parlance, is not something that is confined to India. So the Platonic triad talks about these highest values of the good, the true, the beautiful. That's from somewhere the entire Western philosophical tradition draws from. Yeah? And you put the good, the true, the beautiful against this, it's more or less an exact translation, which means what is the upshot of that? If the seeking of the true, the seeking of abiding existence, the seeking of joy, yeah, was something that was confined to just a particular society, it would not be universal. One would not be seeking that which is abiding, yeah? Because that would be conditioned by the other which seeks something else. Yeah? The fact that these have come up independently in different societies shows that these are something, these aspirations are things which are fundamental and universal in the human situation. And the process is that of trying to find out that which is true about it, that which is abiding about it, that which is full of joy, unconditioned joy about it. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.